I'm sorry.
It's okay. Public comment. There is nobody here from the public for public comment. We'll call it 2 more times. Public comment. Public comment going a 3rd time. Comment from the first select woman. So today we're discussing the blight. We know we've had the attorney look at the blight ordinance. I know the blight. I thought the blight enforcement officer was going to be here today. Stephen, would you be able to go down and look to see if they're here so they can come to this meeting? Thank you. And Attorney Leclerc, could you please put on your microphone so that everybody can hear you? Fred's on. I have my microphone down, Trish, so that it could pick up both of us. Okay. Discussion and possible actions on referral from the Board of Select Persons. We'll take that one. So as you know, the Board of Select Persons, they pushed which ordinance did they push towards us? For us, we're looking at the blight ordinance. Oh, here we have the blight officer down here now. No problem. So we have the blight enforcement officer here now. So, John McKenzie.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
If you could tell us a little bit about what you guys are looking to do.
John, hold on. You have to get a mic.
I'm just going to interject. I cannot hear a word if he's speaking.
He's not speaking yet, Trish.
I can hear you too.
Okay.
He's just
Sorry.
making packages. Hi, how are you? Here you go.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll have a package. I'll have it on your chair for you, Trish.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
No worries. Kurt made copies though.
Not a problem.
I only had a few little things in it.
So it's really going over the blight ordinance, the citations you want to go over, the tier structuring you want to go over. And this really needs to be discussed so that we can bring it back to the Board of Select Persons, so the Board of Select Persons can vote on it. We also have Jim Baldwin with us, Director of Land Use. Right. Selectwoman Danka's on the phone so she can hear. So, good afternoon, everybody. Good evening. It's after 6 o'clock. Good evening. So, Fred, I don't know if you ever met John McKenzie. He is our new blight enforcement
Yes,
officer.
We've corresponded.
We've
but
corresponded
never met in person.
on behalf of a client.
It's a pleasure, sir.
Yeah. Okay. Who would like to kick this off?
I will.
Okay, John.
Can everyone hear me?
Trish,
Check,
can you
check.
hear him?
5 by 5.
Barely.
Hold on. Okay, I'll move you. There you go. Go ahead. Speak a little louder. She can't hear you on the microphone, so you're gonna have to just talk
That just
loud.
records. It doesn't
Hey,
amplify.
I'm so sorry.
Okay.
She's participating by a cell phone over
Gotcha.
there, so
Okay.
kind of.
So the purpose of this meeting is to discuss the current anti-blight policy, some downfalls of how the language has been written, and potential changes to the language to help clean up a lot of inconsistencies with each process during a issuance of blight notice of corrections, notice of violations, and eventually, if it gets that far, notice of citations.
Okay. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions so far? Trish?
I don't have any questions so far.
Okay. All right. So what? Attorney Leclerc?
Good afternoon,
You guys have to talk louder, member.
commissioners. I am speaking loud. Yeah. Trish, could you hear me?
I can hear you now.
So we took a look at the red line of the anti-blight policy that we were provided, and a lot of good comments and changes. I just flagged a couple of them as things that we may want to discuss. The first is in section 4-148, definitions, in paragraph 4 in parentheses that begins missing, damaged, or boarded windows or doors. Those are basically definitions of conditions that constitute blight. The only thing I noted was you have both damaged, peeling paint, decayed, unpainted, or missing siding of 100 square feet or more. As to unpainted, my comment would be if someone has unpainted because it's either number 1 stained or number 2 they have a natural wood such as a cedar, I don't think that wouldn't be blight. They may just want it to age to a gray patina. I just wanted to flag that unpainted, do you really mean unpainted?
Should be unprotected.
Unprotected? Well, how would you address that? Someone who just doesn't do anything, they put cedar up and doesn't do anything. Do they just leave that natural to turn gray, or should that still be protected? That's my question. I'm trying to come up with a way so we don't get a challenge.
Unprotected is lettering.
If I may,
Sure.
to interject. So there has been discussion since, because Mike Margansky and I went through this ordinance in detail over several days and basically picked it apart section by section. And there has been discussion since we completed this back in, I think, late October, early November, of specifically the siding issue. And we are of the agreement that unpainted, peeling paint, decayed siding is a rabbit hole that may not want to be dove into as far as blight's concerned, because there would be so much to not only assess and address, but because there's so many different types of siding, some properties we would not be able to assess the type from the normal public view, from the street view, because we can't walk down people's driveways for things like that. So we are of the mindset that should not be included.
We have a high level of, Trish, it's Mike Margansky. We have a high level of properties within town that not only have issues with maybe paint, and the square footage could be relevant or irrelevant, but there's also houses that have vinyl siding, aluminum siding, and some of these houses need power washing. So when we look at, geez, we're gonna cite somebody for peeling paint, but we have a house that needs to be power washed. We would just really rather take direction from this commission to how they feel about the enforcement of peeling paint, how siding goes. If your siding is missing greater than 100 square feet, the siding's actually missing from the side of the building. But if you've got peeling paint versus a house that just needs a really good wash, we're missing that both. So
I would be fine with that. If I can just want to let you know where this came from, and I think your first select woman would, she will concur with my statement. I don't think we're trying to create work to make you go around and fix everything. I think it's a number of factors, right? Is it in a location that is seen often? Is it a busy road that is going to contribute to the look of the town not having any standard? Are the neighbors complaining? Maybe it's a remote house and it's not as big of an issue. And I know this can all sound a little bit unfair because it is a little dependent on where you live, but the issue is there are a number of residents, when I walked around last summer, there are a number of residents who brought up, and it's not just residents, it's also our businesses, thinking our town looks trashy because we have no standard of how we are requiring things to be maintained. So then you end up with maybe absentee landlords or neighbors trying to create a situation because they don't like another neighbor. I mean, we've had a number of people bring up the fact that they want standards set that people need to follow. I will share with you, I'm a little concerned just with the punitive nature of things, because our goal is not necessarily to collect thousands and thousands of dollars of fees. That's not the point here. We just want people to maintain properties to the best of their ability so they do not look like blight and they do not look like trashy properties. So, and it's not just based on, you know, that would be nice, but I'm very sensitive that we have elderly people and we may have people who cannot necessarily afford certain measures. But that's where I would want our blight department to work with them, and let's be creative on what we can do to assist or make it look better. Because, I mean, but that's where all of this is coming from. So I understand, Mike, the concern there, because I've brought this up myself, even though I'm a big proponent of adding to the blight ordinance. So we really need, I agree, we need to be careful, like, what is the square footage? What is it exactly that we're looking for? I think we want to give the blight department some, you know, authority and comfort in what they're looking at as blight, but we do need to be sensitive that is this a property that is often seen based on location? Is this a property that neighbors are complaining about, and is their complaint valid when you're looking at the property? You know, so I hope that makes some sense. I know it does create a bit of a caveat because we do want to be sensitive, depending on people's situations, and it, you know, anyway.
Hey, Trish, it's Brian Leclerc. I think you have to be very careful if you suggest that something should only be selectively enforced.
That's right.
Because, you know, you can have someone at the end of a cul-de-sac, well, most of us will never see that except for perhaps the two neighbors that greatly bothers, and it affects their property value. The same is, you know, you just got to be careful if you're trying to do such selective enforcement. If no one complains, there may be good reason why the neighbors don't complain. This is someone you've lived next to for 30 years. It bothers everyone else. And I
No,
think
that's true, and I'm not necessarily trying to be selective. I think what I'm saying is I'm not trying to create a situation where we expect the blight officers to go out and look at every single house and deem, you know, all these homes, because we do have it's an older town. I don't think the right answer, though, is not doing anything or not coming up with any standard, because that's how we got here. We haven't had a standard, so people have let properties go that necessarily might not have.
And
You know,
I understand where Selectwoman Danka is coming from on this one, because, sorry, Trish, because, you know, when we were out walking last summer, we heard complaints from residents saying, look at that house, it's bringing the value of my house down. Or there was interior lots where the interior lot looked like dog doo-doo, and no one saw it but the person who can see into that interior lot. You know, our blight laws clearly state we have to be able to see it from the road. Well, we can't see an interior lot from the road. Only the person who lives next to that interior lot can see it. So I know we have, I don't know if selective is the right word, but to another point is, you know, maybe wording along the lines of well-maintained home. You know, but then what is well-maintained?
That
Right.
could be
that might be a little
misconstrued
too
as
subjective, but
Right.
Um,
It should relate,
no, go ahead.
it should relate to a property maintenance standard. And we can't find standards, or a definition of these standards, prescribed by other organizations. For example, building code refers to SEC,
Mm-hmm.
except the recording states. They have a manual that prescribes property maintenance standards.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of those definitions could be used. For example, which is why we want report, we use painter, we could all talk about it very well. We really is, technically right. So it's not detrimental to the traffic. So I think that what we're looking for is the actual standard that we would want to use. What's our standard for that? And I think once we reach that point, then we can go ahead and
Going back to section 4, where we started talking about unpainted, I think the language decayed is appropriate, because you could have an unpainted house, like many houses on Cape Cod, for example. I'm sure they're protected many times, but sometimes they're not. If it's just natural but not painted, that's okay, in my opinion. But if it's decaying, if the siding's decaying, that should be white. And as far as siding, plastic or aluminum siding, maybe we insert a word or something similar to filthy. If it's filthy or moldy, then it should be attended to.
whether we use the word govern, we use the word, decay, stronger,
Deteriorated.
Okay.
So we can pick all of it, but we should pick the wording out of a standard that's already been established.
I would agree with that. Trish?
Yeah, I agree.
If I may, and I just gave Brian a copy, and I have copies for everybody. So, having been in this position for only 6 months, I'm learning on the fly, so to speak. However, I did come up with a communication tool as part of my notice of correction letters, and I have copies of it for everyone.
Trish, I put
And-
one on your chair.
I'm sorry.
Thanks.
Telling Trish to put one on her chair.
So, what I have seen so far is probably 70+% success. As far as getting most specifically residents reaching out to me with their situation, whether it's by email, whether it's by phone call, or even in some cases handwritten letters mailed back to town hall. And that gives me peace of mind to say, okay, they're aware of it, whatever the situation is, and they're willing to work with me, whether it's asking for an extension, or if they have special circumstances, like there's one, I won't say which address, but one specifically where the gentleman is elderly. I couldn't have known that in advance. And that's part of the, I'll say, disconnect with when I first reach out to a homeowner. I don't know their situation. It's what I see when I drive by, or if it's a complaint that has come in. So it's purely visual and potentially subjective. And this flyer, letter, whatever you want to call it, offers some respectable communication from town hall to the homeowner saying, reach out to us, let's have a conversation. And in some cases so far, I've offered extensions because of their circumstances.
Right, so Trish, what he's showing us says Seymour Blight Enforcement, and it says, to whom it may concern, the enclosed notice of correction letter is an official warning the blight enforcement officer has taken steps to contact the owner and occupants, and it gives an address, to discuss the alleged violation and request the same for remediated. Failure or refusal to respond to this notice within 14 days will invoke the anti-blight policy notice of violation provision in the Town of Seymour Code of Ordinance. Submit in writing a corrective, in parentheses, actions plan prior to a date with a reasonable time frame not to exceed 60 days of all work to be completed. Then it says Town of Seymour notice of blight violation. gives the address, the date, and the blight enforcement, but also says, please contact my office, and it gives him the phone number, and it gives him the address for the person to contact. I think this is a great idea, because here you receive this letter. Does this letter go out as a certified letter?
Yes,
So it's going out certified, return receipt,
and regular first-class mail.
and regular first-class mail, and they have to come. And then if they don't respond to this letter within 60 days, then what happens?
No, so this is basically their opportunity, their open forum to potentially be offered extended time.
Okay.
So they have 14 days from the time they receive it to contact me
Okay.
with a plan.
And if
Oh, that's a great idea, because as these things come in front of the Board of Selectmen to review, if we're going to find them, I would be very interested to know if those certified letters have been proven to be received.
So that's a good point you make, Trish, is part of the inconsistencies in the existing policy with respect to delivery via mail, first-class mail, certified mail, and or physically delivering them to the property owners, which in many cases we can't do because those property owners live out of state, so it would be impossible to do. We had an extreme case where I think this is the first time it ever happened. Every piece of mail that was sent to this particular address, it all came back 4 months later. So we went through the entire process of blight from notice of correction through citation. 4 months later, every piece of mail came back because that homeowner was not picking up their mail from their mailbox. So the Postal Service took everything back. I had to verify it via the carrier supervisor.
Wow.
And we had to go forward with a marshal service to get everything delivered. So that way they were receiving.
Yeah.
So
I
again,
think that will make a big difference in and might help us standardize better how we are looking at what the fines should be. Because again, I'm really not in the business, I really don't think the town's in the business of trying to make money off of this. The idea is to get things cleaned up. So I'm more interested that people want to work with us and get it done and accomplished than I am in collecting a fine. But if they're being arrogant about it and deliberately ignoring, that's a whole different story. And I think that needs to come into play as far as.
yes, and we do have those cases where they are being delivered and they are being ignored. So it's the pendulum does swing both ways, and I think with the changes we've come up with for notice of correction, notice of violation, how they're delivered, it gives us a little more latitude. So that way, if X happens, okay, now we can do this, or if X doesn't happen, we can do this. It's consistent through each step.
Okay.
But we have to be careful about the fines too. If we have a fine schedule, then we should go by that schedule. We alleviated or reduced the fine substantially recently.
Yes.
And why? Why?
That's a great question.
Because we felt badly for the property owner because he claimed he was so busy and didn't receive notices. Well, notices are sent out in a proper way. The due
Correct.
process was invoked, and we should not be reducing the fines substantially because it's selective enforcement again. Lower the
Well,
fines. and the-
Fred, I agree with you. I do agree with you, but I think that is what I'm saying. Like, this will help us standardize how we look at these. The point in that one was that I do recall, I'm pretty confident, I recall being told that those certified letters were not received. They had been returned. So
That's
the guy
correct.
didn't get notice, and I would rather him put the funds to use fixing the property than paying the fine.
But the
Are you
law,
walking in?
the law deems that
I am.
once the letter is put in the mailbox, it is sent and ultimately received by the recipient. That's the law. But Attorney Clerk is shaking his
Attorney
head.
Stanek is right, the mailbox rule.
The mailbox rule, you know.
And that's
But I thought those certified letters had been returned.
so.
They hadn't been received.
So if I may, we send first class mail and certified return receipt. And in only one case since I've been the blight officer, the regular first class mail has been getting delivered. Now, not to go off into the weeds as far as delivery service is concerned, because postage, as we all know, is very expensive, especially with things like this when we're sending letters. Did you lose her?
No, she's right
Right
here.
here.
Oh,
We found her.
okay.
I apologize.
I didn't know what you looked like, so my apologies.
It's okay.
Oh, shut up, Siri. So with respect to postage, I did, and Mike and I discussed it a little bit, and we tried it on a couple occasions, and it actually worked. Where there is an option, again, the cost is, I think the variable here. First class priority with delivery confirmation. That offers a tracking number for standard first class mail. However, instead of it being, I don't know, what's first class postage now, 69 cents? It's $10. So it's a huge number. However, you're getting confirmation that that letter was delivered.
Yeah.
Don't you get that with certified mail, though? Don't they have,
Certified mail, if I may,
Go.
certified mail return receipt, they don't have to sign for it. The postal service is unreliable. For all these years, the mailbox rule has been upheld in my citation hearings by the hearing officer. So when John or I sent out these letters, we just had one recently where, they admitted that they got it by regular mail, but then they ignore the certified return receipt. I just sent out a zoning matter the other day. Send it out both ways. I know that the owner of the property got it by certified mail because the rest of the problem got it, but the return receipt came back. It was like a waste of money to send it out, but I had to do it that way. Because if they failed to do it, then at least I have the mailbox rule to argue with the hearing officer against the defendant that it was sent both ways. And the mailbox rule upheld 3 or 4 days after the delivery of the mail date. So if I mailed it on February 1st and I sent it out certified, and the certified came back a month later, and sometimes it could be 2 months later before it comes back, because we just know how that goes, that 3 days after the mailing is when that legal date starts. The clock ticking for any property owner that it was at least put into the mailbox. And our hearing officer has upheld our rulings based on that.
And you testified, I'm sure, under oath that you put the mail in the mailbox.
No, not that I put it in the mailbox, but I gave it to the postal service.
Well, that's what I meant.
Yes.
I think I agree with Selectman Stan's point, which you went to. You said, there's a procedure that we follow, and that procedure is prescribed by statute, I believe, right? And if we're following that, we're following the law.
Right.
If we follow the law, it's considered received. So, to go back to your point, when you, the Board of Selectmen, who is the governing body, and that hears a appeal to reduce a fine, whether you reduce it or not,
can always overserve, if you will. Sure. Yeah, just,
Because what we're finding, what we're gonna find, and we are definitely heading into this, is that we're going to be looking for out-of-state residents, landlords that, are not taking care of their property. I mean, most of the, if you will, Seymourite residents that receive something like that, they're the first ones to contact our officers and say, oh my God, they'll tell them if they have a problem, or if there's someone, in some cases, someone's been ill, elderly, had a tragedy in the family, at which point, I can attest to these two gentlemen will go out of their way. Mr. Margansky's physically mowed lawns himself for people. So, I think that, what we want to head towards is a standard that we want to consider what would be blight, and a standard that we use for delivering the notices. And if people choose to ignore the notice, well, we're sorry. When they plead their case to the Board of Selectmen or to a hearing officer, I would hope that falls on deaf ears.
If we want to be very careful, you mentioned using a marshal. If the certified card doesn't come back, or if it comes back, then we could say that we use a marshal at that point. Overserve, as Brian
Yeah.
said.
And I would defer that to council, to council, if that is a proper procedure, and if that is, to Selectman Stanek's point, then I think we should make that a policy. That's what we follow. That's what we follow. And that everyone realizes. It came back, we're gonna serve it by a marshal. Because ultimately, we want abatement of the situation. And I agree, we're not looking to collect revenue. The revenue or the fine is only the teeth, if you will.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We're looking for abatement, compliance, first and foremost.
I think when these things come before us, I agree we should have a standard on how we're looking at them and what we want back, right? So I think not just the blight issue and how long it took to start remedy or if it's not been remedied, but these are all the contacts that we've made, and to your point, like the various types of communication we've tried to have with the resident, what has been received and ignored. I mean, that kind of trail would be really helpful, I think. And then if we come up with that kind of standard on what you'll provide to us, and we can look at everything kind of equally, we can set a standard on how we look at the fines. Because if they're ignoring all of them, and now they just don't want to pay the fine, I can totally support that. I think in the past it's been it's not like we trust your department, and at the same time, we don't always have you present or all this backup data when we have a resident in front of us or a letter from the resident stating, I was in another country taking care of sick family for 3 or 4 months. I wasn't getting notices, or I wasn't here to do it, but I'm willing to do it. And then starts doing it and providing regular updates, and it gets fixed, right? But we don't have all of that back data.
Correct.
On how you've tried. We trust you've tried to communicate with them, but we're only hearing this one side, and the back end is kind of like, we know they're doing something, but how do we address this now? And it always ends up being, fix it, you have this time frame, and we'll diminish it, get rid of it, things like that. So
Right.
I agree with the standard, absolutely.
And I think a lot of the language changes for each step of the process. One gives the property owners their due process with respect to time to contact us. But it also gives us a standard, so if that first, just starting from the beginning, if that first step time expires, they ignore, okay, now we're on step 2. They still have time on their side. Due process. If they ignore, step 3, step 4, et cetera, et cetera. But
Right.
like Jim said, what we have now, the current, there's inconsistencies with respect to delivery.
I would agree with that. And to get back to how, the board knocked down that fine, I think that if this board is going, it should be in here that if the board is going to hear an appeal, right, then we should have the blight officer and ZEO and land use in that meeting with us so that we could get what they're hearing, not just reading something on a piece of paper.
And in addition to that, we have added language to the violation step 2, where the property owners can appeal during the violation period. So fines haven't even incurred yet. So again, due process, giving them the opportunity to plead their case before those numbers start rising, or
Right.
before they even start, excuse me.
You give the public, the property owners, a number of opportunities to contact the department, contact the BEO, get before a hearing officer to try to correct before you just start fining them, and that's clear in this. I did have one other comment in the same section of definitions that we should talk about, speaking of mowing people's lawns. We have a definition in 8 of chronically overgrown brush, grass, weeds, or similar vegetation. It then says properties with a grass lawn, and that's good that we talk about a grass lawn, so your farmers, we're not going after a hay farmer who may have
Right.
be growing crops, shall not exceed a height of 18 inches from June 10th through November 10th of the year. But then it says lawns shall be maintained within 10 days upon receipt of a notice of correction. So that's good. So if I have 19 inches of lawn and I get the notice of correction, I mow my lawn. It then says, in addition to maintaining the property once every 2 weeks. So if I've got my lawn back down to, 1.5 from its 19 inches, I don't, you're now requiring people every 2 weeks to mow their lawn, but they may not be in a blighted condition. They may not be over 18 inches. And if it's
Isn't
August.
18 inches kind of high? I mean, we are increasing
That's very,
from
Well-
12
So
to,
you're saying, once you reach 18 inches, and you have 10 days, when it turns to hay, we'll hay it down, bring it back down. That's kind of.
And they keep cutting it.
That's a little weird.
Right. Could we,
I
I
think
would,
that's very high.
I think it's very high, number one, but I also think that we shouldn't put it in there because what if we're in the month of August or July and we're saying every 2 weeks, but we're not getting any rain?
It should just, again, it goes back to what we would expect as a standard. No one would expect.
18 inches.
Who came up with 18
I'll ask
inches?
Brent,
You?
is there-
No, I'm showing what 18 inches
Would you
is.
accept a standard of 18 inches high?
No.
Oh.
But I would also like to see no mow May put in there,
that's
you
why
know.
we have that June 10th as kind of the start date. It's a state thing.
It allows for the pollinators to do their business that the governor supports.
Did you talk to her before the meeting? I asked the same question. Like, what the heck is
No mow
May?
Mays because the temperatures
State-sponsored
still do
program
not
for
get
government.
above 50 degree and your pollinators need to be in their little hives until it gets above 50 degree.
How does you don't shave?
No shave November.
November, okay, that's it.
That's the police.
Times a year, bring their grass into a healthy lawn situation.
Grass will seed itself.
DEP thinks otherwise.
So if you start May 31st, you haven't mowed your lawn, chances are you're gonna have a lousy lawn the rest of the season.
I understand that, but there are some of those that care more about the aphids and the little pollinators than they care about anything else.
So the only other thing I'd like to add to this is, I've only received this as Brian.
Yes, we just
I
got
got
it.
it. Just coming in.
Okay.
Yep.
So, I am not prepared to, just going through it, I am not prepared, and I've spoken with Mike, and I haven't seen John, but, I would like to take this document and go back through it. These are your red lines, Brian?
No, my red lines are actually, what color?
His red lines
Mine are
are
not
blue
red.
and it says
His
BL.
blue, staff is red.
No, mine's not blue either. Mine are, but my changes are, hold on. I wish I had made a change to something. No, because I did not,
Okay,
I did not do
if someone could give me the answer of who's writing what in this, because I have no idea.
I can give you that answer.
Okay, I have no idea who's
Yeah, the blue and red is
crossing
not
out,
me.
who's redlining, who's blue lining.
Okay.
But I'd like to go to, just for conversation that we're having.
Yeah.
We walk at 8, go to 9. 9 is gonna be one of the most,
9.
9, one of the most subjective. And here we go with the town of Seymour.
The motor vehicles?
Motor vehicles,
Okay.
recreational vehicles, or vessels, it's very important, because we have people that have not 1, not 2, but 3 boats, we have people that have sailboats, we have all sorts of things that are located on the property. So that's one area that we really have to look at. And again, go to a standard, because we have residents that would honestly say, they'll have 5 junk cars out there and say, oh, those are the 5 junk cars that I'm making the one good car out of. And when they're actually doing, motor vehicle repair in their cars.
Oh, yeah.
So that's something that we deal with regularly.
Mm-hmm.
Or they wouldn't call Daddy-O's and collect $100 to remove that piece of junk car because they think it's gonna be valuable someday. Case in point, I had John look at something that was over on Spring Street that we saw out of another inspection, I believe. We didn't even know. There was a car, and a gentleman, was that the car that he was gonna?
It's the car in the woods.
Huh?
That was the car in the woods, and we found the deck was bigger.
Again, you go to a point that we've heard before from Larry Chinesky, oh, that car is valuable. It's got a tree growing through it. Literally a tree and branch. We have to go, and we can't get it that far, we have to go to a definition. We have to use the definition of what we're trying to say.
And we could take that out. We just went through this with the parking ordinance, if you remember. We talked about camp trailers versus utility trailers versus
Versus trailers parked on a road growing.
tractor trailer. Yeah, it'd be clear, because you don't want someone accumulating. Well, you have zoning, then it could cross into zoning at some point too. But Fred's right, we have to, let's be more specific, even though they may be included, just so people know.
I know that you are not prepared, Mr. Baldwin, but in your role, I would very much welcome any feedback you have on any of these.
Yes.
On how to clean up language or what we,
Well,
a recommendation based on what you're seeing.
what we see, and again, in section 9, I'm just reading it again, within ordinary public view. Well, in this case, maybe for blight, but in zoning, it specifically states, Mike, that you cannot have more than one.
You can have one unregistered.
One
vehicle.
unregistered vehicle. It does not specify within ordinary public view. And I'll give you an example. If you were in a, let's just say, I like using Fred's name, right, because I like that name. I'm close to it, but I want it to be there. But the problem is, right,
Why is he picking
if I can't see it in ordinary view, light, and you have 5 of them leaking oil or doing whatever, well, we can use the zoning regulation there. So it may not fall directly under blight, but at which point we have to issue a zoning violation. The zoning violation has no teeth at all.
No.
And then it goes to zoning board of appeals if
It
they
goes
don't
to
know
an
what
appeal or whatever.
And of course, they're probably in the same quandary this board is at times,
Well,
where
the
they're
appeal
not
would be
sure.
just the appeal of the zoning enforcement's decision.
Right.
saying, You know, that it either is there or it's not there.
So then we need to give zoning more teeth as well, right after we clean this up.
Zoning's governed by statute, zoning's not gonna get any more teeth, blight has all the teeth. But in the case where I'm saying, would it be possible, and ask Brian this, to take the word ordinary view out? Or can we reference another standard? Can we reference a zoning
The
standard?
question is, how is it blighted if no one can see it? That becomes the question of the argument.
Could we reference that it's blight if it's in violation of another standard in town?
But who sees it is what it is, because when we were going through the ordinances before, there are those that live in front of interior lots, and as I stated before, you cannot see the interior lot from the road, so if someone wants to have 5 campers, on their property and a caved-in pool, no one's gonna see that because it's an interior
I'm
lot.
asking, can the blight ordinance
Mhm.
reference that if it is also in violation of any other town ordinance or standard? So if you have 5 abandoned cars.
That we can allow the blight
if you
officer
have
to
5
address it.
abandoned cars that are behind a property, even though they're not in ordinary sight or in violation of any other town standard.
But how do you see the 5 cars if you cannot see it from an
They
ordinary
might get a
sight?
complaint from the neighbor that can
So it'd
see
have to
the
be in
interior
writing.
lot.
Right,
So it'd
okay.
have to
And
be
with
in
the
writing.
teeth to
The
address.
neighbor can see it.
You can see it from his
From-
window.
From a certain vantage point, but we can't see it in ordinary view.
Mhm.
So then, we are not granted access, okay? Again, the only access we're granted is to the front door. We have the access to go to the front door, knock on the door, that's it. But we didn't see the 5 cars. But the neighbor is saying, hey, look, there's 5 cars back there in the woods, right? Can we use the blight ordinance to say that although it's strike out ordinary view and put in violation of another ordinance that the town of Seymour?
Well, we can keep an ordinary view, but Brian, could we add or
I know that was
in
one of Karen's
violation of
biggest
any
things,
other
too,
town ordinance or town?
Or that property owner.
Because I could keep the zoning enforcement officer off too. He can come to my front door, I could just politely say, turn around and get back to where you came from. You're not allowed on my property.
Really?
Which he would only have to then go and seek an injunction or something, to the matter where the court would decide.
Jim, we'll research that. That's an interesting question. I could see it from my house. It's not public view, but if I invite people, as long as I could see it. It's one thing if no one can see it except by drone, perhaps, or space view.
Karen, that was big on Karen. That was
Different,
when
yeah.
Mrs. Stanek was on the
I could see-
board. That was big with her.
Well, a neighbor
Yeah.
can call blight on
Right?
someone
See
else's
if we can
property.
stretch it to that. If a neighbor could see it, it makes the complaint, and you could verify by going on another
Right,
property
but
with
he would just be
permission.
a
You
mediator.
viewing it from the neighbor's yard does not provide, that's not really, well, I
Well,
suppose it
It
could
could
be.
be.
The definition in this document, ordinary view, means et cetera, and it does say, or private property in
As long as
reasonably
that
close
private
proximity.
property owner gives you the access. So
If the
if
private
there's
property
anybody complaining
owner
about
next door
the
can
interior
see
lot
it, it
next door,
seems to fall into
So
that
at
definition.
point,
So
at
Anne
that
Marie
don't
would
have
have
an
to give you
interior.
access to see
I
it.
have an
yourself.
interior.
Any
Yeah.
access to go on.
Right, oh, yeah,
But if I did,
right,
I would let you have
right.
View from the average
If-
grade.
These are the questions
Yeah.
I have. At what point do we say, well, obviously, most of the cases where that would arise, it's going to be a neighbor dispute.
Right.
Okay?
Right, and when it becomes a neighbor dispute, how do we knock it, how do we sit there and say, is it really blight or is it just the Hatfields and the McCoys?
Right, but
McCoys?
if in turn, that
Right.
neighbor were to call, say, one Smith Street's one, I looked at one Jones Street, or whatever, and the blight officer makes the determination, well, I can't see it from ordinary view, or I can't see it from the street, or everything else, but that somewhere the blight officer would have the ability to say, in our regulation, oh yes, it constitutes blight because it is in violation of another ordinance of the town of Seymour. Or do we just send out the blight officer returns and sends out the zoning officer, and then we get under zoning. Then zoning doesn't have the teeth that blight does.
Take-
Zoning, we've had cars parked and we sent out zoning letters and everything else, and if people ignore it, there's very little we can do.
No, I like that idea. Brian
Yeah.
will
I'll take a look
into
at that. That and the fact is that it is legal to see it from other private property as
That's in the
defined, to make
definition.
sure.
That's
Because
there.
we got to be careful because we need to make sure also we're enforcing it equally. That
Right.
we say only one neighbor sees it from their yard. Well, is that any different than the house at the end of the cul-de-sac that you can see from the street, but everyone ever goes down the street? So we have to be uniform how we do this, which is important. But I'll look at those issues. That's an interesting question.
Brian, can we get that before our next meeting, which is on February 4th? Because I would really
Absolutely.
like to start
Yes.
putting this
By then
ordinance
we'll have done that, your department to look at it again.
to rest before the
And I-
spring,
And
summer
the red and the blue, I'm
comes
not
around.
sure. Do you know who the, I think there's a question.
And
but
Jim,
I
if
can't-
you
I
and
think-
your
I think
team
I'm
can
actually
look
light
at
blue
this
looking
and
at the way it came out on
provide
this.
your skilled feedback
Is that
and
the right-
recommendations. But again, I think that
I would never write ad.
we do want to work together and come up with a standard on how they're going to be presented to us, how we're going to view it, and make decisions. And
$2 saves.
but we do need to give this some teeth so that we're satisfying the many people that brought up the fact that we're not requiring much of our property
Correct.
owners, and it is noticeable, because that's a big complaint. Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, John.
This is to answer your earlier question, Jim. So the text in red is replacement language for the existing language. The blue is new language.
What did the attorneys do?
They
Ours-
just
my-
he
my
just
comment-
reviewed.
I have 2 margin comments, and some of mine is a light blue cross out of things like the. One thing I didn't like is you're charging people $300 to have an appeal of this, which I don't think we can do. We don't think that's proper to charge people to have an appeal.
So you're in light blue?
Well, an off blue, I want to call it. Look at.
There's two bubbles that you really can't see.
The printout, you can't see the comments from
for
Brian.
instance, if you look where I made a change to, for instance, okay, page 7 of 8 at the top, under that B, under 4152B, a person who chooses to appeal. Someone added, it was added in blue, but then I deleted and redline put my slightly different color blue on top of your blue. I don't get to, you can't pick the colors, that's part of the problem with red, with Word.
Last month, I believe it was last month at this meeting, the council was ill-prepared to even comment on this. I can't read this until the text.
When did he
You
send
have to
this?
hover over it, it's the only way to do it. With you,
He's
when
not-
it's live,
Pat's not
yeah, that's how
coming?
you,
Thank you.
we can't pick the color, you don't get to, that's too,
I'm a simple person.
It's
Last
too-
month, we were here in front of First Selectman Trudeau's standing.
Yeah.
And it was said that this whole thing had to be looked at by council because they weren't aware.
and we did, and I sent
Attorney
a red
Bertrand is
line
here.
back, but unfortunately, when this got printed, well,
We're totally unprepared. We are totally unprepared to sit here and
Jim, do you
Okay.
have this copy with the bubbles on the side? Can I just want you to,
yeah, our copy, our comments are about the wood siding,
Do you have this?
the 18-inch lawn height,
I don't need it.
and
There you go.
eliminating fines for taking, eliminating a fee to take the appeal, that was
Do
it.
you want to look
All
at
I
it?
want to know.
The rest is good.
Anything that these two gentlemen are doing is illegal.
Light ordinance, do you
No.
want to take a look at it?
And we took that out. The only things I took out is potential, that I, illegal, I believe, is charging people to take an appeal, and I crossed them out.
This is the
And I just
one.
raised his questions, how you wanted to treat unpainted wood.
No, you can look at
You
it.
realize
That's it.
I know.
that in the last hearing that we had, the light hearing from Karen Fisher, we had our ass handed to us.
We had what?
You had your
Okay.
butt handed to you? You had your butt handed to you?
These two gentlemen had their ass handed
But,
because the council for the person that was doing the blight killed us. We all walked out of there. Like I said, when I took it to these two guys, I said, what the hell are you doing? I just don't want that to continue.
all right, so council, if you could look at it, get us back to us by next week so we can have it by the February 4th meeting, so we could all speak to it intelligently and give our comments. Okay?
Got it.
And I do love this. That's great.
So I will, what else do we have on the agenda for this one?
I think we have to table the balance.
Yep. Can I have a motion to table the rest of the discussion to this February 4th meeting?
I'll make a motion to table the remaining agenda items of this meeting to the February 4th meeting.
Motion by Fred, second by Trish Stinker, discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye, motion carries 3-0, thank you. Is there any public comment regarding the blight? Public comment for blight? No public comment for blight, I call the meeting adjourned.
I have to go to my car to pick up the gift certificates for the
Go right
Vice Minister.
ahead.
I'll be right back.
I won't start the meeting